A shock grenade rolled into the lecture hall, but the Human Deathworlder just blinked. At 71 seconds, she reached for the tin. The chamber was running at full Class 8, 180 dB of structured acoustic chaos. Infrasound cycled at the frequency that makes a body produce fear without reason, with a stroboscopic overlay doing what it was built to do, and the smallest cadet Thrawn Cass had processed in 21 years reached across the pressure stool, closed her fingers around a dented civilian tin, and tightened the lid. 3 seconds. One motion. She sat back down. Thrawn's shoulder plates went black. She didn't suppress it. She hit the halt switch at 89 seconds, not because protocol required it, but because she had understood something and needed the test to stop. The tremor hall fell silent. The kind of silence that rings. What she did next, I did not have a category for. And I have been doing this for 21 years. Stay close. 4 days before the Orvith Compliance Board arrived, Thrawn ran the calibration check on the tremor hall for the 7th time that week. The array didn't need adjusting. She adjusted it anyway. Then she pulled up the failure record. 51 Class 8 failures in 22 months. 3 required medical extraction. 1 Varric named Shah still carried permanent resonance damage in both primary hearing organs. His file listed the outcome as acceptable. Thrawn had signed that form. 0 human attempts. Not because humans were excluded, but because no one had thought to schedule one. Her shoulder plates stayed pale. Pale meant the suppression had been running long enough that it was now the baseline. She set the board review date on the display. 4 days, and looked at the number beside it. 340 staff positions. She had been looking at it every morning. The Class 8 cohort arrived at 8 o'clock. The Vashri pack entered first, for of them, gills already sealed. Their neurological bond was a strength under stable conditions. In a resonance environment, one felt distress and all 4 received it. The pack leader moved to the front and didn't look at the walls already compensating. Behind them came the Cortai cadet, Retharain, silicon lattice exoskeleton, spine rigid, 11 minutes early. The 47 Hz floor harmonic would find the resonant frequency of his nervous system and lock it. He knew the test's reputation. He stood there anyway. The Trelac trio filed in together. Rhythm-dependent motor function. Chaotic acoustic environments would break their movement lock and freeze them solid. They knew this too. Darfin came through last. 11 years old, 33 kilos. She tucked her chin as she crossed the threshold. Not prayer, not concentration. The way a person tucks their chin walking into wind they've walked into before. She set a small dented tin on the intake shelf, sat on the pressure stool, and didn't look at the walls. Valorn leaned toward Thrawn. The tin? Should I log it as a potential acoustic dampener? Thrawn looked at it. Civilian storage metal. Dented corner, lid worn, smooth from handling. She had logged it at intake. Dietary supplement, mineral flakes, 2 taps onto every meal tray. She hadn't thought about it since. Log it as present, she said. Leave it. She initiated the lock sequence. The tremor hall's doors sealed. The walls began to hum. Thrawn pulled the trigger. At 22 seconds, the Vashri pack collapsed. The pheromone chain fired. 1 member registered the infrasound as a threat, and all 4 received it at once. The pack leader hit the evacuation signal before he'd finished thinking about it. All 4 out. Thrawn logged the time. Plates shifted 1 shade darker. At 31 seconds, Rethrin seized. The 47 Hz harmonic locked his nervous system mid-step. The medic moved before Thrawn gave the order. Another entry. Another shade of gray. At 40 seconds, the Trelac trio froze. Rhythm lock broken. Compound eyes cycling. Unable to move without a beat to move to. The chamber held 1 cadet. At 44 seconds, Dara opened her mouth and hummed. 1 low, steady note, not a signal. The hum of someone who had learned that the space between safe and dangerous is a place you can live in if you breathe right. Thrawn's hands went still on the console. She called biometric status. Valorn read the instruments. Heart rate 54. Cortisol baseline. Interior geometry within normal parameters. Repeat that. He repeated it. She didn't move. The chamber was running at full Class 8, and the instruments were reading heart rate 54, cortisol baseline, inner ear nominal. They weren't malfunctioning. They had simply never been asked to read this. No species in the database had inner ear geometry that could hold up under this frequency load. Either the instruments were wrong, or the girl in that chamber didn't fit any category the system had built. Thrawn didn't say this aloud. She watched the clock pass 60 seconds. Dara was still humming. At 64 seconds, the acoustic pressure had worked the tin 4 millimeters forward on the shelf. The lid was loosening. Thrawn watched it and didn't reach for the intercom. She waited, and she didn't know until later what she was waiting for. At 71 seconds, Dara's eyes opened. She looked at the tin. Then she reached over, no bracing, no performance, and tightened the lid. One motion. Clicked home. She sat back down and resumed the hum. No distress. No signal. No exit. Thrawn's plates went black. The full involuntary shift in front of every Zilhari on the deck. Shorn had stopped writing. She was aware of him staring. She didn't move. There are things you cannot suppress. This was one of them. At 89 seconds, she hit the halt. The tremor hall fell silent. Dara opened her eyes and looked through the observation window directly at Thrawn. Not defiant. Not triumphant. The look of someone who had waited out what she expected to wait out, making eye contact with the person who started it. A 33-kilo child in a room with a 0% completion record. Looking through the glass at a drill instructor, whose plates were black with shock she couldn't hide. She said nothing. Thrawn had the thought she'd been pushing back since 44 seconds. She was never the one being tested. She just hadn't known what for. Shorn's plates had gone gray too. Neither of them spoke. The Orvith Compliance Board reviewed the recording at 1400. By 1730, the Academy's compliance rating was reinstated. Dara's file received one flag. Anomalous, not a liability. That was the entire entry. That was all the system had room for. 340 positions preserved. Normal operations resumed. Thrawn attended none of the clearance meetings. She submitted her resignation the following morning. Not from failure, but from the weight of having understood something the institution would spend the next century filing under acceptable outcomes. The tin is behind UV glass now in the atrium case, lid sealed. The plaque calls it a survival marker. Thrawn calls it a thing she brought from home that she didn't need because she had already survived everything the home required of her before she arrived. Her shoulder plates are still gray on day 6. She doesn't know if they go back to pale from this. She is choosing to believe that is a question about plates and not about her.